Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Books, Girls, and Purrs. I don't have the space right now to do my usual videos in the different area in my office, so here I am on my bed. I'm gonna try to make this work. Okay, so today we're gonna discuss my August book wrap up. It's gonna be short because I did not meet the goal of reading all the books I wanted to in the month of August. August was just a madhouse, and that's just how it went. And by the time it hit the end of the month, I looked at the fact that I had 2 books left, realized I was just not going to get them done in time. And I was just trying to make something happen that can't happen. And I need to have a specific cutoff because in September I have a very large amount of books to read, which I'll get to in another video. For September, I'm going to have to do a TBR because there's just so much I'm trying to tackle. But yeah, we'll get to that when we get to that. All right, so we're going to discuss the first book I didn't finish reading, and that's How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents by Julia Alvarez. I've been wanting to read this for a long time. I've read some of it before, but then put it down. For whatever reason, I probably got distracted. And once again, the same thing happened, and I was right around the same area of where I put the book down in the first place. In fact, I, ended up trying the audiobook, and the 2 books that I didn't really get to read the month of August are really not the kinds that I want to multitask while listening to the audiobook. So I couldn't make it happen. So on the back it says, when their fathers rule in an attempt to overthrow a tyrannical dictator is discovered, the Garcia sisters, Karla, Sandra, Yolanda, and Sofia, and their family must flee their home in the Dominican Republic. And so then they end up in New York in the 1960s, and their story takes off from there. The family dynamics are incredibly interesting. I can't review this book because I just didn't get to it. So the next book, another one I've been wanting to read for a long time, it's been collecting dust on my bookshelf, is Machado's de Assis, 26 Stories. I don't know, I don't think I'm saying his name right. This is a revered author. He has plenty of work out there, and I just don't know enough. And so I was actually reading a section about the author's life, which is incredibly just fascinating. The author's life itself is really fascinating, and I wish that I had more time to read this. On top of it, there's a short story in here that, The Alienist. And so I'm wondering if the story The Alienist is either coincidental or is actually where the show The Alienist derives from. But again, I just don't know enough. So these were just a bunch of short stories. I also like reading short stories between full-length novels. It just helps to break up the zaniness of my mind. So on the back it says, widely acclaimed as the greatest writer ever produced in Latin America, as well as another Kafka, Machado de Assis was famous in his time for his psychologically probing tale, a world populated with dissolute plutocrats, grasping perviness, and struggling spinsters. I don't even know if I said that all right. But anyways, so this sounds incredibly good. Another one, I didn't get far. I read a couple of the first stories and also the section about the author's life. I also tried doing this by audiobook, and it just wasn't going to happen. Same thing. I really have to sit down and concentrate and read this or audiobook and listen to this. And my schedule's just been crazy. So I didn't get to get very far. But at some point I will be reading it. I'm sorry, I'm on my bed and my cat's just acting crazy. Alright, so the next 3 books I did read, but I didn't get to take the type of notes that I usually take during the month when I'm reading, that I also like to go over before I shoot a video. That just didn't happen. So this is probably why it's going to be so short. Where do I start? Saga. Actually, the only book I did take notes on are Saga, and it wasn't many, but so I'm just gonna list them off. So once again, the family at the center of the story is on the run for volume 5. It seems like that's just gonna be how the story goes throughout. And this book explores like what are the different reasons people join the military, how war does not directly impact those that wage that war, how does war affect nature, and the components of war that give birth to rebellion. For instance, they even explore like the different forms of rebellion. For instance, there's a character in here that I really love, and this character decides that because they have lived an existence of seeing all this pain and death go on around them, that they only want to pursue a life of pleasure until their dying moment. Like that's all they're gonna do. It's gonna be about pleasure. It's not gonna be about carrying anybody else. And for that character, that was like a personal choice of rebellion, to live in this world of perpetual war. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Throughout the entire season, Saga also explores parenting. And for in this volume, the author really makes a connection between using violence as a form of punishment or as a consequence, and how that just perpetuates a cycle of violence. And I thought that was really interesting. The 2 main characters, Marco and Alana, if there's anything that you learn from both the characters, is that when they're together, they're very codependent on each other in a way. And although they lean on each other to be better people, when they're separated, it's almost like they don't know how to function. You know, they don't really know how to function as individuals on their own in this life. They lose all sight of the ideals they're trying to stick to, because they don't really have each other to hold each other accountable. So that's pretty interesting, and I think that says a lot about their relationship. Again, this is my my favorite comic. I say that every video when I talk about Saga. So yeah, pick it up if you haven't read it. Scoot over. All right. So let's see, what should I talk about next? I'm going to talk about a poetry collection, and it's called Tesoro by Yesika Salgado. I just recently talked about this in a book haul. I just purchased it recently. I've read other work. I read Hermosa by this author. Again, it's a poetry collection. I didn't get to take notes, so I'm just going to briefly talk about some of the poems in here and what really struck me about these poems. Oh, for instance, here's one that's emblematic of what the topic is throughout this poetry collection. It's called The Women, and it says, "Where do I begin? Mommy, my tias, my grandmother, do I follow the bruises to El Salvador? Do I dissect each fist here in Los Angeles? I am a freight train with no conductor. All I know is the blow of my whistle. A single question. How do you survive the men?" So this book collection is really exploring not just family dynamics, specifically how women move around in the world, especially when there's societal pressures to marry or to be in relationships, and what is the role of a man in that relationship, specifically toxic ones, abusive ones, and how at times it seems like society just treats those elements as if it's a part of being a man. That's just what I felt like was explored in here. And I'm gonna go off and try to think about, there's so many gems in here. So there's two poems in here. One is Tesoro and the other one is Survival Tactics. And what I really appreciated in both those poetry choices is that the author is talking about colonization, but not in a broad way, not about the systemic issues, if I could say. It's more about something very personal. It's about the body. It's about how a man can colonize a female woman's body. And I think that the author really put something forth that's really like thought-provoking, being put in a situation where a man can cut a woman down into a very two-dimensional thought rather than embracing the whole person that's in front of them. And I thought that was really incredible how the author put that together. Let me see. Oh, yeah. The author also has a poem called The Therapist. And to me, that was reminiscent of another book called Minor Feelings. I think that's by Kathy Park Hong, I believe. And in Minor Feelings, which is filled with short essays as a memoir, Kathy Park Hong talks about how she would like to see a therapist, but she wants to see a therapist that's also Korean so that she won't have to explain her culture and in order to be understood during these sessions. And I feel like the Therapist poem is very much like a poetic telling of that same narrative, that the author is seeing someone that's not from her culture, and they're just like not clicking. They're not really, it's almost like the author has to therapize themselves because the therapist just doesn't have the skills to really go along that journey and aid the author. And I thought that was an interesting conversation around the same topic. And lastly, there is, let's see, there's a poem called Knives and another one called Soltera. And in one, the author is discussing needing to make sure that she's guarded and protected when she goes out into the world, so that she's not a victim of violence against men. And in another poem, she's just discussing how what the women in her family do, what they accomplish, and yet there's other family members that come to her and ask her, you know, do you have a boyfriend? Are you gonna get married? So there's this notion that to be a woman, having a man is a necessity rather than a want. And if we're gonna look at having a partner as a necessity, she's kind of pointing out like that women are strong and capable of doing all the things that need to be done, whether it's considered in a gendered female role or a gendered male role. Life goes on, things are getting done. And so if we want to talk about necessity, no, there's no necessity, right? So it's just an interesting conversation that I felt like there's necessity, which kind of turns into this like toxic, oh, I need someone to fill this void almost, or oh, there's things I can't do. But that's just not true, right? versus a want. So I absolutely love this collection, and her poetry is the kind of poetry that I think I'm going to go back and read over and over. I love her narrative because although it's poetry, it feels a little more like prose. And I think that's what helps me really understand what's going on and why I appreciate it so much. So that's a good one. The last book that I read, which again, I wish I had the time to write notes, is The Undocumented Americans. This was so good. I actually blasted through this pretty quickly once I picked it up. And I'll just read you the back. It says, in 2016, writer Karla Cornejo Villavicencio was on DACA when she decided to write about the hidden lives of her fellow undocumented Americans, the singular effervescent characters across the nation, often reduced in the media to political pawns or nameless laborers. Looking beyond the flashpoints of the border, these stories are not deferential or naively inspirational, but show the love, magic, heartbreak, insanity, and vulgarity that infuse the day-to-day lives of her subjects. So right off the bat, I like how the author in this book really challenges the language that's even used around people that are documented. Right in the title of the book, it's called The Undocumented Americans. And so many times people that are undocumented are reduced to being called undocumented laborers or undocumented workers, as if their only function is to serve others. Like that's the only reason why you warrant an existence here in the United States. And I thought that was so thought-provoking, but also such an apt observation just around language itself, and what that really says about the people that use those words in a way I'm thinking about. And so there are so many parts in this book that I marked up, but instead I think I'm just gonna check one section and talk about it. And so the author writes, I just keep bleeding, and it hurts the most when, after a long day of reading about people forming human chains to block ICE officers from arresting a man and his child, I sit down to write about my parents. Now imagine that 40, 30, 50 years in, of course Octavio is sick. We're all sick. It is a public health crisis, and it's hard to know how to talk about it without feeding into the right-wing propaganda machine that already paints immigrants as charges to the healthcare system and carriers of disease. The trick to doing it is asking Americans to pity us while reassuring them with a myth as old as the country's justification for slavery, that it's reassuring Americans with a myth that people of color are long-suffering marvels, built to do harder work, built to last longer and handle more, reminding them what America already believes in its soul, which is that we are impervious to pain. As scholar Robin Bernstein has put it, we can only tell them we're sick if we remind them that, sick or not, we are able to still be high-functioning machines. So throughout the book, the author brings up, probably like in each chapter, the author is tackling a different person's story. For instance, it'll be people that volunteered during 9/11 that were also undocumented, so that put them in a very like unfortunate, difficult position when trying to seek medical assistance. And also so many, let's say, restaurants or just companies around the area when 9/11 happened were undocumented people, so then their employers weren't necessarily willing to vouch for the fact that they have all these undocumented employees. So there's a lot of underreporting that goes on just around that subject alone. I loved every story. I loved also the author's vulnerability about wanting to go into these situations and just fix everything. That's not really how it works, right? And how she struggles with how she feels, her ideology, and kind of learning that there's only so much that she could do, you know, and that her strength is her pen, her writing, and telling these stories. It's a really great read, and that's another book that I feel like it would be really nice if it was required reading in high school. That'd be cool. In high school, college, that'd be good if that was like required reading. It's a really good book, so I highly recommend that you pick it up. That'll be it for my August wrap up. Ugh, let's see if I can get these. I only read 3. This looks like a huge stack, but I only read 3. And I'm gonna go full steam ahead with my September TBR that'll be coming soon. And what else? I'm a little bit behind on the closed captions. Usually I just mention it below, but I'm like 6 videos behind. I try to have closed captions ready within 24 to 48 hours, but again, August was just all over the place, so I'm slowly gonna climb to get those all taken care of and just meet my goal of just having the closed captions ready when the video is released, or just be at most the 48 hours behind. But I'm sorry for anybody that really depends on that, and then I'm behind, but so I'll catch up. Anyway, so if you're watching this, thank you. Like, subscribe, comment below, and I'll see you later.